You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Welcome to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name is Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. That's right. If you wonder what anarchy is all about, no, not what happened in Ukraine. That's what happens when you've got a centralised, hierarchical system where a few people can mobilise hundreds of thousands to kill other people. That's what anarchy is against. It's against hierarchy. It's about breaking down hierarchy. It's about ensuring that individuals and small groups don't have the power, as we see ad nauseum through human history, to order other people to do the most disgusting, degrading, horrible things to other people. For what? For what? For what? A little bit of extra land, a bit of extra resources, put up their flag, just disgusting stuff. So anarchism is against that. Because, see, anarchism is about creating a society without rulers. Not without rules, without rulers. So what gives rulers the ability to mobilise hundreds of thousands of people to kill other people? Inequalities in power and wealth. So if we can break down hierarchy, break down these inequalities, then megalomaniacs like me and you will never have the opportunity to mobilise hundreds of thousands of people to do our bidding. It's that simple. It's about breaking down power relationships. It's about holding wealth in common. Because if you look at this federal election, if you look at things around you, what can happen in a private investment for private profit world depends on the amount of resources you have at your disposal. Look at the Disunited Australia Party under Mr Palmer. And you can see how money talks. So anarchism is about creating a society without rulers, anarchos without rulers. What gives rulers the ability to determine the lives of billions of people? Inequalities in power and wealth. So the anarchist struggle is the struggle to share power, devolve power, and the struggle to hold wealth in common and share wealth. It's nothing new. It's the original biological urge which made us the scourge of the planet, the human race. The fact that we can cooperate together for our own benefit as a community, not just individuals, but as a community. That's what makes us different from many of our brothers and sisters in the animal and insect world. Although, as you can see, with bees and ants and that, cooperation is a big, big part of their success as a species. All right, let's move on. Look, the ball's in your court. Now, if you're not interested in the federal election, turn the phone off, okay? Or the radio off, or whatever you're listening on, the net off. Turn it off. Go and listen to some music, or lie out in the sun, or, go out into the rain and dance in the rain. But if you are interested in the federal election, well, keep listening. Now, I'm trying to do something which is a little bit difficult because, you see, people tell us that we live in a democratic society and that everybody's got an equal chance of, putting their ideas across. Well, you don't. There's legislation in place in this country which makes it almost impossible, unless you've got very rich backers, for any independent candidate or small political party to actually gain any traction in the election race. And as far as the Senate is concerned, it's even worse. Now, a few months ago, I'm sure most of you who listen to the program will know, but most other Australians are not aware of it. The Liberal National Party and the ALP joined forces to pass legislation to create mega political parties. And to be a registered political party, you now need 1,500 members, which is difficult for up-and-comers. So that's one way you get rid of the opposition. We had 66 registered parties. I don't know what number we have now, but obviously the number has dropped. A number of these smaller parties have coalesced into, bigger groups. But again, when that happens, their ideas become diffused, filtered, and it's an issue. Now, another thing you do is you ensure that in order to get any traction, you need a lot of wealth. Now, it takes at least $1 million to run an independent campaign in any House of Representatives seats, and obviously much more in the Senate, especially in the larger states with the larger population. So, again, there's that issue. Then there's the issue of deposits. Now, you may find this hard to believe that most people who actually stand for Parliament never get their deposit back because you need 4% of the primary vote. Then you structure the ballot paper in such a way, especially in the Senate, to ensure that anybody who's got any independent credibility has no chance. There are no independents in the Senate anywhere in Australia. And if you look at your ballot paper, there's a line, there's boxes above the line, there's names below the line. And the boxes above the line, in the majority of cases, is the name of a political party. Now, if you've got two or three people who are independents who join forces, you can get a box above the line if you pay your $4,000 to $6,000, depending on what it is. But the thing is, you're not allowed to have the word independent next to your name if you have a box above the line, if you're not a registered political party. Again, that is to discourage people from voting for independent candidates. Then if you do have your name below the line, well, obviously, you've got to tick or you've got to number many more boxes than above the line. So above the line, currently, you need to number 6 boxes, 1 to 6 in the order of preference. Below the line, you need to number 12 boxes. But the good thing about being below the line, and that's why I'm interested in standing as an independent Victorian Senate candidate, is that you can have the word independent next to your name because they believe that you haven't got a snowflake's chance in hell of being elected. Okay? Now, why would anybody with any brains bother going through all this? And then obviously you've got to get people to nominate you to stand. So you've got all these issues ahead of you. Now, why would I bother to stand? Well, I am sick and tired of the trivialisation of alternatives and politics in this country. The corporate-owned media, and to a lesser extent the government-gelded ABC, are ahead of the trivialising pack, at the head. And nothing highlights this than the fiasco surrounding Mr Albanese, who forgot a number. Now, I forget what I had for breakfast. Now, obviously, people in those positions have advisors, and if you're in the government, you've got the whole public service behind you providing you with all that garbage. But what was interesting was the same day that Mr Albanese had his little slip-up, which can happen to anybody, we heard that Mr Tudge, the former, in brackets, Federal Education Minister, had reached an agreement with a former staffer who accused him of, bullying and all this stuff, of $500,000. Although no wrong had been done. Now, I'd love to get $500,000 courtesy of the Australian taxpayer, all right? Now, to me, that was the news of the day. The fact that a federal minister who supposedly resigned from the cabinet was still in the cabinet, nobody gave a shit, and at the same time, the Australian taxpayer paid $500,000 to a former staffer because of allegations she made about that minister. Now that should have been front page news, should have been on every radio program, on every virtual media site, but it wasn't. Front page news was about the leader of the opposition forgetting a number. That's how things are trivialised in this country. That's how it's impossible using the corporate-owned media of the government-gelded ABC to get any ideas across which go against the private investment for private profit ideology which underpins every single aspect of life in Australia in 2022. Now, when you look at their policies, and the thing is, you'll see the Liberal National Party will be a policy-free zone. Now, I couldn't believe it yesterday. The Prime Minister has offered the oil industry, the oil refineries, another $250 million on top of the tens of millions of dollars they've been given over the last 12 months to ensure there's enough oil in this country. Now, you would think, irrespective of the changes which are occurring to the fossil fuel industry, you would think that any government worth its weight would have oil reserves. Now, our oil reserves are part of the United States oil reserves. Now, it's a long way between the US and Australia. So here we are, a little bit more of corporate welfare. So this is what happens in a private investment for private profit world, where we bow, scrape, kowtow at the altar of mammon every day. So, do I think I'll be elected? No. I don't have a snowflake's chance in hell of being elected if I'm in the lucky position of gaining enough people to nominate me to stand as an independent Senate candidate in Victoria. No. Do I think there'll be much interest from the corporate-owned media and the government-gelded ABC? No. And I'll tell you why when I go through the policies that I'm interested, policies that I've been promoting through the anarchist world this week for decades. Decades. Not just policies that have been cobbled together, to get a few votes. You see, ultimately, in a parliamentary democracy, they don't care. They don't care what happens in between elections. They really don't care. You can protest all you like, but at the end of the day, they have the courts, the police, the military to ensure that those protests are contained. And we see it over and over again, irrespective of what you think people are protesting about. So they don't really care. All they care about is what happens on election day, which will be the 21st of May this year. Now, you may be pissed off with the whole thing, and you may not be on the electoral roll, and I understand that. And you may be so pissed off you're going to vote informal, although that's illegal, And I can understand people considering the state of politics in this country today. But unfortunately, the parliamentary puppets do have some power to have an impact on people's day-to-day lives. And we see that constantly. We've seen that with the unfortunate asylum seekers and refugees who find themselves still holed up in Papua New Guinea, to a lesser extent Nauru, and quasi-jails around Australia for having the audacity to apply or look for asylum in this country. 10 years. 10 years later, constitutionally, we can do whatever we like with them. So considering the number of protests that have occurred regarding that particular issue, you can see what I'm saying is they don't care. But they do care when you rain on their parade. They do care when you take votes from them. And most importantly of all, they do care when you can break through the intellectual, philosophical, ideological barriers which are put in place to ensure the private investment for private profit mantra continues to dominate every aspect of our lives. And they care especially when you do it during an election period. So I'm not asking for money. I don't want anybody to waste any money on my campaign. I'll be wasting $2,000, which would be my contribution to the Treasury, as I won't get 4% of the vote. But I think it's worthwhile that we have people on the ballot paper, and it's not just myself, but other people on the ballot paper, who have ideas and policies which go against the grain, which go against the private investment for private profit, deregulation, corporatisation, globalisation, privatisation, tsunami we have all had to weather over the last 4 to 5 decades. Because although you may have more things, debt is increased, the gap between rich and poor has increased. And what highlights this to me more than anything else, and I almost come to tears, not that I'm too bloody old to cry these days, but I almost come to tears every time I see a Smith family advertisement somewhere telling me what I know. There are 1.2 million children living in poverty in this country. Remember, there's only 25 million people living in this country currently. And that they need money from you as a private citizen in order to ensure that these kids get a fair break and a fair education, although we supposedly have a public education system, which is chronically underfunded because governments continue to pour money into the private education system. So here we have a private charity asking Australians not to help people in the Ukraine, not to help people in Bangladesh, you know, the Myanmar refugees, the million refugees, not to help the refugees from Syria, not to help people who are dying of lack of clean water or starvation somewhere else in the world. No, but to actually raise money to educate Australian children who are falling behind because of the lack of funding in the public education sector. Give me a break. I've got nothing against the Smith family. I'm sure they're very nice people. They're trying to do the best they can. But give me a break. Have we come to this in this country? Have we come to this? Think about it. Nothing highlights the inequalities and what's happening in this country today than this. Nothing highlights this more than this. And if you think it's going to get easier, it's not. With inflation increasing, interest rates increasing, and the private sector refusing point blank to pay decent wages and provide secure employment for people, and the so-called Uber economy, you know, the gig economy, drowning the real economy, you know, the 19th century economy, you can understand how difficult things have become. And when you see the legal tape that has been wrapped around trade unions in this country to make them basically, you know, put them in body bags so they can't even agitate for their members without going bankrupt or being deregistered. And when you know that striking outside an enterprise bargaining agreement period in this country, after you jump through thousands of hoops, is illegal, you begin to understand the situation we find ourselves in. So why not rain on their parade? You got a week. Nominations close on the 21st of April. See, that's another little trick. Normally, it takes you can get between 10 and 21 days before nominations close. This time, 10 days. Exactly the minimum. Exactly the minimum. During the Easter break. To make it very difficult for people like me, who are want to stand as independent candidates who need to get about 120 people to nominate them to get those numbers. Very difficult. So if you go into your ballot box, not your ballot box, if you go into the voting place or you get your ticket in the mail or whatever, your postal ballot, you may find there's less people there than there usually are. And it's for a reason. Because with increasing dissatisfaction in the Australian community, it's important that the choices that people have during an election period are greatly diminished by excluding people and organisations who are not part of the hate brigade, who think every problem is due to somebody's religion or racial origin or the colour of their skin, who are not part of the religious nutter brigade. But obviously anybody with any real ideas, you just make it a little bit much more difficult for them. So they fire up their hands in horror and say, why bother? Why bother? Well, not this little bunny, because this little bunny is going to give it is Easter, that's why I'm a bunny. This little bunny, just in case you missed the joke, this little bunny is going to give it a hot go. Now, this will only interest Victorian listeners, but if you can bear with me, we will go through it. Now, the first thing we need to remember is this is Wednesday the 13th of April. Today, between 1 and 3 p.m, I will be standing outside community radio station 3CR at 21 Smith Street, Fitzroy. So, if you wish to nominate me and you have the time and the inclination to nominate somebody to rain on their parade, piss in their tent, well then I'll be outside 3CR, 21 Smith Street, Fitzroy from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Between 4 to 5 p.m, I'll be outside, yes, I'll be loitering outside railway stations. I'll be outside the Yarraville Railway Station, which is at the corner of Murray Street and Birmingham Street in Yarraville. If you don't see me or you can't find me, you can always ring on 0439 395 489. Now, between 6 p.m. to 9 p.m, yes, we're having our normal dinner at La Porchetta's in Carlton, 392 Rathdown Street, Carlton North. So you can join me, pay for your own dinner, you like that. And, there are no freebies, on the Joe Toscano Independent Senate ticket, I can assure you of that. This isn't Clive Palmer speaking, all right? And you can turn up for dinner and you can nominate me at dinner. Or you can just walk in, nominate me and go home. Now, Thursday, the 14th of April, between midday and 1 p.m, I'll be on the steps of the Victorian Parliament House, Spring Street, Melbourne, which will be the regular public housing, everybody's business gathering in the steps of Parliament House, because obviously this is an important issue. Between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m, I'll be at the Paramount Food Court. That's 101 Little Burke Street, Melbourne, because after the gathering, some of us troop down for a light lunch and a bit of a conversation. And you'll like this. Between 3 p.m. and 4:30 p.m, just in case you don't know what to do and you want to take the kids to Luna Park, I'll be outside the Luna Park entrance. That's right, where the clown is. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? At 18 Lower Esplanade, St Kilda. So the Luna Park entrance where the laughing clown is between 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. So that's the next 2 days. That's Wednesday the 13th of April, Thursday the 14th of April. And that's the main reason I'm doing that. Is very simple, is to give people an opportunity who may not have a car, who may be working, to come and see me, find out what I'm speaking about. Now, it gets better. Now, all this stuff will be on my Facebook page, Toscano for the Public. or Joseph Toscano. It's all up there. The dates, the times. Now, on Good Friday, the day Jesus Christ was nailed on the cross and died on the cross, I won't be eating Hoscrot buns. I'll be wandering the streets of Melbourne once again, looking for people to nominate me for the Senate. Between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m, I'll be outside the Ringwood. That's right, the Ringwood railway station. And again, doing this outside a railway station gives people the opportunity to catch a train, then catch a train home if they haven't got private transport. Between 11 a.m. and midday, I'll be outside the Frankston railway station. That's on Friday, the 15th of April. Between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m, I'll race across the city and I'll be outside the Northgate railway station. And between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m, I'll be outside the Flinders Street station. That's on Friday. Now, I'm going to give you a rest on Saturday and Sunday. And the next time you'll be seeing me loitering outside railway stations will be on Monday. That's right. Monday, which I think will be the 18th. That's right. Monday, Easter Monday. Here I am loitering around railway stations trying to get you to nominate me as that independent Victorian Senate candidate instead of relaxing. At between 11 a.m. and midday, I will be outside the Footscray railway station. Between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m, I'll be outside the Sunshine railway station. Between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m, I'll be outside the St Albans railway station. Now, obviously, we may add some sites to that, but the last day that you'll be able to nominate me for the Senate will be on Tuesday. That's right. That's Tuesday. I think it's now I'm getting confused here. Well, next Tuesday. And I will be at the West Papuan office at 211 838 Collins Street in Docklands from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's right, from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Because obviously an independent foreign policy, which includes West Papuan independence, will be part and parcel of the policies which I will take to the election. Okay? So all this stuff is up on the net. If you're a bit confused where I'll be, I can understand if you've got no access to the net. If you ring me on 0439 395 489, 0439 395 489, I can let you know where I'll be. And if you can't make any of those places, still ring me on that number. Maybe we can meet somewhere. But as I said before, I need about 125 people to nominate me. You actually need 100, but you need a reserve. There's no point because if I'm successful in getting the numbers, I will be going into the Australian Electoral Office and putting in all my papers next Wednesday afternoon. So that doesn't give us much time, especially with the 4-day Easter break. So if you are interested in, look, if you still got a little bit of faith in the parliamentary system and you still vote in elections and you are on the Victorian electoral roll, you can do it. Now, if you listen to this program anywhere else around Australia, you can do the same thing. You can do exactly the same thing. It takes a bit of effort, a bit of energy, a little bit of cash, but you can do the same thing. You either leave the field, take your bat and ball home and sit there and wait for the next cricket match, or you get in there and knock a few sixes over the boundary line. It's up to you. Now, policies. Not only do we have policies, we have mechanisms by which to fund them. They may not be very popular with the private investment for private profit crowd, but we're not here on the Anarchist World this week. We are not here to please them. And I'm not here to please the corporate-owned media, and I'm not here to please the government-gelded ABC, and I'm not here to please the ALP or the Greens or the Liberal National Party. We are here to put forward policies which will be of benefit to the Australian people, not to transnational corporations. We are here to put forward policies which will ensure the Commonwealth is used for the common good. You do know that we do belong to the Commonwealth of Australia, and the concept of the Commonwealth came during the Puritan Revolution when Charles I had his head cut off in England in the 17th century. That's where the concept of the Commonwealth came from. The Commonwealth of Australia. Obviously, we don't have a Commonwealth. If we had a Commonwealth of Australia, we wouldn't have 1.2 million children living in poverty and having a private charity asking us to donate money to assist them to get a proper education. Extraordinary. It brings tears to my eyes. Just extraordinary. But the ball's in your court. You can sit at home and complain, and nobody's going to listen. Nobody cares. You can ring up the hundreds of so-called institutions that have been set up to look after you by government and private organisations, and they'll make the right sounds, but at the end of the day, little changes. You can come and nominate me or nominate somebody else who's putting forward policies which go against the private investment for private profit ideological morass we find ourselves in. All right, let's look at a few policies. Policy number one, you know about this, universal basic income. A universal basic income. That means every Australian gets a living wage, irrespective of what they earn, so that everybody's on the same level playing field. So people can make a choice whether they want to be part of the wage slavery or whether they just want to survive and just, enjoy their lives. A universal basic income. You get rid of Centrelink. You get rid of all those plethora of pensions which are out there. All that nasty business you've got to go through in order to, apply for an old age pension or disability support pension. And then, if you are in the workforce, that money that you're given in a universal basic income is clawed back through the taxation system. So that means that people who are working, who make the choice to be part of the wage system, then through the taxation system, give back that universal basic income, and those people who don't earn anything because of physical issues, emotional issues, age-related issues, health issues, don't have to jump through hoops every day, and they actually got enough to pay their rent or their mortgage or their food and have a little bit left for a little bit of a life. That's a universal basic income. Nothing new. The Romans had a universal basic income for the proletariat to keep them in order, keep them in order. Breads and circuses, that's where the terminology breads and circuses comes from. The plebeians, had a universal basic income. Obviously it was funded through slavery. We're not advocating slavery. This is an IS you're listening to. But I'll talk about funding soon. Universal basic income. Secondly, diversify the economy. Re-expand the destroyed public sector. For example, instead of giving money to the private company or oil refineries to hold oil for the benefit of the country, what's wrong with the concept of having a publicly funded oil reserve? Hey? What's wrong with the concept of keeping the NBN in public ownership? What's wrong with the concept of having a people's bank which is publicly owned to reintroduce competition back into the banking and financial sector? Think about it. Think about it. Expand the public sector. Secondly, provide seeding funding for the collective and cooperative sector. There is no collective or cooperative sector in this country. About 0.01% of people would be involved in the collective and cooperative centre. Most people are involved in the private sector. Insecure, part-time, poorly paid work for a significant proportion of the population. Many of those 1.2 million children are not just the children of people on disability, single parents, old age pensions, but they are the children of people who are involved, who are working, but can't make enough money with poorly paid, part-time, insecure work to actually meet their financial commitments. So you expand the cooperative and collective sector. It will provide competition. You have a three-way competition between the private sector, the public sector and the cooperative and collective sector. Expand the economy. Another policy, mining resources. What do the exploitation of this country's mining resources lead to? The creation of billionaires, a billionaire factory, who then pretend to be philanthropists because they're actually not paying their fair share of tax. So any entity, either privately owned or on the stock market, that has more than $100 million in assets, 70% tax on profits. And any new reserves to be developed by the public sector. This not only provides resources to this country's First Nations people and the rest of us, but it also gives us a mechanism via which to phase out fossil fuels. But of course, currently we have people struggling to keep these industries alive because their livelihood is attached to these industries. But if these industries come under public ownership, they can be phased out quickly with minimal dislocation, especially for universal basic income. Think about it. Another policy. Uluru Statement from the Heart, 2017. Pooh-hooed, put in a cupboard, forgotten. And what do they want? So simple. Tell the truth. Have a Makarata. Tell the truth about how Australia came into being and the cost to this country's First Nations people and the continuing cost to this country's First Nations people. A voice to Parliament. Not an alternative to Parliament, but an elected voice to Parliament. And thirdly, to begin negotiations regarding treaties between this country's First Nations people and the rest of us. Simple concept. Incorporate them. And when it comes to the climate emergency, it's all about green capitalism, isn't it? It's all about green capitalism. This is an opportunity. We're the sunshine, continent. We can make a lot of buck out of it. Well, it's not about green capitalism. It's about creating decentralised energy systems so that we've got sustainability. It's about looking at consumption and create an economy which is based on the consumption of real needs, not artificially created needs. And that's what we have today, a society which is eating itself up. The list goes on and on. Let's look at another issue, simple, migration, refugees, asylum seekers. Who makes the best migrants? Refugees and asylum seekers. There's hundreds of millions of them out there. Why steal developing nations, talented people, and bring them to this country? Don't we want to educate our own people to take on these skilled positions? And already the business sector is clamouring to bring in people on temporary work visas to do basic work. Maybe if there was the work was secure, the wages were decent, maybe we wouldn't need that issue. You wouldn't need all these. We had 1 in 7 workers before the COVID-19 pandemic were temporary workers. Let's move on. Disasters. Climate emergency equals disasters, including pandemics, as the world heats up. If there's one thing, and I have been involved in, I've been involved in floods, and I've been involved in a fire which destroyed a home I had a mortgage on. And I can tell you, this happened over 20 years ago. Did the bank come up to me and say, "Oh, Joe, we'll suspend your payments for the next 6 months or 12 months"? No. They wanted to be paid on the dot every bloody month, although the place was in ruins. And we had all the carpetbaggers coming around saying, "Oh, look, we'll buy the property for this ridiculously low price." And within a week or two, we just basically left to our own devices, and myself and my family. And if we didn't have insurance, which came to the party, we would have been still paying off that mortgage for the non-existent home. And this is what's happening in Lismore today and other parts of Australia where there's been bushfires and floods. After a few weeks, nobody's interested. As I found out, you're left to your own devices. You survive as best you can. So as we know, there will be an increasing number of natural disasters. Another policy that I'm interested in, which I've actually raised on this program time and time again, the establishment of 50 regional city disaster centres. Disaster centres which are ready to take on, house people in a disaster. Disaster centres which have personnel and equipment to deal with any disaster, whether it's a natural disaster, a man-made disaster. But have it in place. And I'll talk about funding in a minute. Have it in place. Have it there so it can react. Possibly in a city centre, you could have maybe 500,000 people attached to each disaster centre. In the regions, maybe 300,000. Rural areas, maybe 100,000. But actually have it there, ready to go, coordinated through Canberra, publicly subsidised, publicly run. It's there. Not this piecemeal disaster response we see over and over again with after a few weeks and a few people singing to raise a bit of money, or Mr. Dutton organising one of these internet crowdfunding things, as if he's not a member of the government, but that's a different story. Another policy, simple policies. These are simple policies. These are not anarchist policies. These are not socialist policies. These are not radical policies. These are simple policies. And how about pouring a little bit money, a bit more resources and money into the health system? Everyday disasters, stories regarding the public health system. Poorly funded, poorly resourced. Everybody's saying, "Oh, it's all a matter of staff." Well, it's not just a matter of staff. It's a matter of infrastructure. It's a matter of training. It's a matter of making health a priority. Aged care sector. See what happened when Mr. Howard privatised the aged care sector. Look at what's happening. And the reality is today that, if the Morrison-led government is re-elected, and it's always a strong possibility if it's re-elected, it'll be re-elected from the votes of the elderly. my crew, the people I spoke about last week, the over 60s, you know, feeling unloved, unwanted, insecure, thinking that this government, which is based on a private investment for private profit ideology, will somehow look after them. I mean, I've seen some of these contracts for some of these privately run aged care facilities. You even got to pay if somebody's got to brush your teeth, extra payment. Extraordinary. They go on for hundreds of pages, these contracts. Unbelievable. And the list goes on and on. So these are policies, and I could go on with policies galore. I mean, but what are these policies? What is the common thing about these policies? The common thing about these policies is about putting people before profits. It's about putting the welfare of all the citizens, all the permanent residents, all the asylum seekers, all the refugees in this country ahead of the interests of the corporate sector. It's about public interests before corporate interests. That's what this campaign is about. Now, Joe, this is all very nice, pie-in-the-sky crap, but how are you going to fund it? How are you going to fund it? It's easy. It doesn't take a revolution. We don't have to bring back the guillotine. All right? You don't need to, shoot people. It's very simple. Through parliamentary legislation. First way to raise money. A 1% tax. That's right, tax, T-A-X. Happy to use the word tax, unlike all the major political parties. Tax is good. A 1% tax on all financial transactions over $1,000. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Anywhere between $100 to $120 billion. That would fund the universal basic income. Ka-ching. How about a 1% stock market tax? These days in Australia, you get taxpayers' money if you own shares. They're called franking credits. Aren't you so lucky? You own a share, you got the disposable income on a share, you get a franking credit. And all those of you who say, well, I've got a superannuation and it's going to look after me. Bullshit. The thing about superannuation, as you know, is the more you earn, the more you save, the better your lifestyle. So most of your superannuation will disappear within a decade and it'll all go towards funding your own retirement. The state provides nothing. Threadbare social security system. For universal basic income, you don't need a threadbare thing. So let's go back to funding. So that'd be all natural resources. 70% tax. If you think that's too high on natural resources profits, who do these resources belong to? They belong to the Commonwealth, the people of this country's First Nations people. Why should this wealth be squandered, given to the private sector to create billionaires? 70% tax. And if they don't like it, they can walk away and we can take over those facilities. And any new mineral resources to be exploited by the public sector. Enough money to fund a universal basic income, a national emergency system, a regional emergency system, fund public education, public health, universal basic income. It's a matter of priorities. That's what elections are about. It's a matter of priorities. Do we allow the private investment for private profit mantra to continue to dominate every aspect of our lives, or we don't? Do we or we don't? Do we sit at home and complain? I mean, the major political parties and the 1% that owns the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication love a complaining culture. We complain about this, we complain about that. What they hate is people who go beyond complaint and want to do something about it. Whether it's as simple as nominating somebody like me or somebody similar to me somewhere in this country to stand as a senator or for the House of Representatives, not because they're going to be elected, because the whole system is geared against the election of these type of people, but because we can raise these ideas in a forum with social media. It gives us that opportunity to bypass the legacy media. And if I do obtain the necessary nominations, and again it's an iffy proposition, but if I do obtain the necessary nominations, well then we will talk about how social media can be used to promote these ideas outside the margins we now find ourselves in, because we're basically marginal. But the thing is, whether we're marginal or not, the ideas that we are promoting are ideas which are fair, reasonable. They're fair and reasonable ideas. That's what they are. Easy to promote, easy to implement, can be done through the parliamentary system. Collectives, cooperatives, national disaster centres, looking after the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And the list goes on and on and on. Look, I'm sick and tired of being told by people, oh, I'm too sick, I'm too old, I can't be bothered, I'm too busy. And then they complain. They ring me up and complain about this, they complain about that, and they complain about it. And I say, well, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean, what are you going to do about it? They say, Joe, well, it's not my problem. Ultimately, it's our problem. If you want change, you need to become active. And you can become active through traditional means, parliamentary politics. You can become active through extra-parliamentary means. But the issue is you need to become active in order to change things. You know, in the 16th century when the Quakers started talking about abolishing slavery, everybody thought they were crazy. Within 150 years, the British Empire had abolished slavery. Okay? Things do change. And they change because somebody, somewhere, plants a seed, and that seed is watered, it becomes a huge tree. You know what? Unfortunately, even huge trees fall down eventually. But it's a matter of continuing to sow seeds. Now, if you wish to nominate me to stand as an independent Victorian senator, there's a list of activities on the webpage, Joseph Toscano, Toscano for the Public. If you got no access to the internet, you can always give me a ring on 0439 395 489. I will be out and about the city of Melbourne over the next 5 or 6 days in order to gain the necessary numbers. Today, which is the 13th of April, if you're listening to this program, here at outside 3CR, 21 Smith Street, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m, Yarraville Station, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. La Porchetta, Carlton North, 392 Rathdown Street, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Tomorrow, the 14th of April, 12 o'clock, the steps of the Victorian Parliament House, 12 till 1. 1:30 to 2:30, Paramount Food Hall, 101 Little Burke Street. 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m, Luna Park entrance. The Laughing Clown, I'll be the sad one, it'll be the happy one. So come along, fill in the nomination forms. Then we've got Friday, Ringwood Station, and the list goes on and on. The list is up on the net. Have a look. Haven't got it on the net. Interested in nominating me. Can't make any of the places. Give us a call. Leave a message. 0439 395 489. Thank you once again for listening to the Anarchist World this week on Community Radio Station. This program is podcast. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. You can write to us, that's right. Post Office Box 20, Parkville, 3052. YouTube channel, Public Interest Before Corporate Interest. Anarchist Media Institute site, anarchistmedia.org. Public Interest Before Corporate Interest site, pipsy.net, and the list goes on and on and on. One missing ingredient, you. I've hit the ball in your court, hit it back. Listen into the Anarchist World this week, next week on your local community radio station.
Sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to the Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.